canine is used for gripping and tearing food, and it's also called as cuspid or cornerstone. And canine is the longest teeth in the mouth. Permanent canine support the incisors and premolars, and it's usually the last ones to go. What is labial ridge? Labial ridge is one that runs cervico-incisally in approximately the center of the labial surface of canines.
Excuse me.
Oh,
You mentioned about canines are the last ones to go. Or the last one to go, right?
yes, Doc.
Can you further expound on that?
Kaysa sa primary nga teeth yung Doc kay mo ang last nga mo irap
Okay, last to be...
sa primary teeth. Ay, so,
Sige. We will expound further on that later. Sige, continue with your slide.
a labial ridge is one that runs cervico-incisally in approximately the center of the labial surface of canines. Canines are the only teeth with a labial ridge. Permanent maxillary canines, in numbering system, in EDA or universal numbering system, it is 6 and 11. In the FDI or ITDS, it is 1, 3, and 2, 3. Palmer numbering system is quadrant 1, 3, quadrant 2, 3. And canine has 4 lobes, 3 for the labial and 1 for the lingual. So, mga niyang mga lobes sa labial, meaning distal lobe, central lobe, and the mesial lobe. And for the lingual, it is represented by the cingulum.
Doc, nakamute po ikaw.
Sorry. Among all the lobes, I guess I asked this during the exam. Which one is the largest lobe?
Central lobe, Doc.
Central or we have the medial lobe? Yeah, correct. Central or medial lobe. So how many lobes are there in the anterior? As I mentioned.
Sa anterior, Doc, may 4 ka lobes.
Okay, so what's the answer? Were you able to remember? I guess I asked this during the P1. Wala na remember. I guess that was a true or false question. I guess I mentioned 4 to 5 lobes, so that was false because there are only 4 lobes, the middle lobe being the largest. Okay? Sige. Continue.
For the arch position of the permanent maxillary canine, the deciduous maxillary canine, and is located third from the midline in each maxillary quadrant. And for the mesial contact is the maxillary lateral incisor. For the distal contact is the maxillary first molar.
Chronology. First evidence of calcification is about 4 to 5 months. Enamel completed is 6 to 7 years. Eruption is 11 to 12 years. Not completed is estimated 13 to 15 years.
Guys, remember the eruption of canines, you have 11 to 12 years. Okay, remember that for the maxillary, it's different for the mandibular. Again, eruption age of maxillary canine, that's 11 to 12 years. Continue.
Labial. Labial aspect. The crown is narrower mesial-distally than maxillary central incisor. It has two slopes, the mesial slope being the shorter than the distal slope. The developmental lines are two shallow depressions dividing the three labial lobes. It's much larger and has greater development in other lobes, resulting in the ridge on the labial surface of the crown. The surface is smooth and bulky in the middle because of the labial ridge. Distal margin shorter than the mesial margin and also has more rounded incisal angle. Height of contour. At contact area, incisal margin divided into two components by tip of cusp. Mesio-incisal and disto-incisal lobes.
By the way, what do you mean by height of contour? Okay, when we say height of contour, guys, that's the greatest convexity of the crown. Again, we focus on the crown. That's the greatest convexity. Again, what do we say by convexity? Is it a depression or an elevation?
Elevation.
Okay, so that means it's the greatest convexity, pinakabugdong part sa crown, or the greatest convexity, or the biggest, the largest elevation on part of the crown. That's why we call it height of contour. Now, it says that the height of contour, as per maxillary canine, is at the contact area, or specifically we have the middle third. But anyways, we'll learn more about this in your oral physiology. But good to know what height of contour is.
Sorry. Labial surface is convex in all directions, but curvature is more pronounced mesio-distally. General outline of the surface is pentagonal. So kumbaga sir, curvature sa sa cervical line sa canine labial surface is, so kung mapansin niyo yung curvature padulong siya sa sir kanang idok kaning sa mesial.
Okay.
So lingual aspect. So crown and root are narrower lingually, and cingulum is well developed, large, and sometimes pointed like a cusp. Cervical line curves asymmetrically towards the apex with slight offset to the distal. So kung sa lingual aspect po ta sir kay ang curvature sa tong cervical line is going sa distal surface.
Can we go back to the labial aspect?
Okay, Doc.
Did you mention about the slopes?
Wala, sir. Ay, wala, Doc.
What's your source? Did you read your modules?
No, Doc.
Ay.
Visual. Ay, yes, Doc. Na ay, Doc. Doc, slope. Ang visual slope ug ang distal slope.
Are you including this in your report, in your slides?
Yes, Doc.
Doc.
So can you expand on that, especially on the labial aspect? Focusing on the slopes, you have the mesial and the distal slope of the canine.
Ang Doc, ang mesial slope, Doc, is shorter than sa Doc, distal slope.
Okay, aside from the mesial slope being shorter, it is also sometimes notched. Okay, notch meaning actually dili siya perfect ganyan line. There is certain curvature in that area. But good to know that the mesial slope, again, for maxillary canines, the mesial slope is shorter compared to the distal slope. That's why in your carvings, make sure na yung slope on the mesial mas mubo, shorter than that of the distal. That's one characteristic of maxillary canine. Aside from curvatures or convexities. So you proceed to the lingual aspect.
Okay, Doc. So, there's a, Doc, sa lingual aspect. Note that a well-developed lingual ridge is seen which divides mesial and distal lingual fossa. So, meaning is the lingual ridge divides the distal and mesial fossa. And a heavy marginal ridge are associated with well-formed cingulum and fossa.
Mesial aspect. From the mesial aspect, the canine looks similar but bulkier than the maxillary central incisor. So,
Balik na sa lingual.
Stop.
There's a lot of information, pieces of information in your modules, but you are not including it in your report. It is as if, you know what, compared to centrals, canines have more anatomy, complex anatomy than that of the central and the lateral. But your report, as if it's very short and there's nothing to discuss about the aspects. Did you have your modules? Or did you just choose what you will input in your report? You are you're missing a lot of important details regarding canines. For the lingual aspect, now focus, the crown and the root are narrower lingually. So therefore, since it narrows lingually, so if you look at the lingual aspect, since ni-narrow man siya from the labial to lingual, ni-narrow means ni-gamay, therefore, you can see part of the mesial and distal aspect of the labial. Kaya ni-narrow. Now, good to know that for the lingual aspect of canines, ang anatomy niya same lang with the centrals, like you have cingulum, right? Remember? From the lingual aspect of centrals and laterals, you have cingulum. You have marginal ridges. You have lingual fossa. You have incisal ridges. You have the slopes. Now, these landmarks are still there with the lingual aspect of the canines. However, they are more prominent even if you compare it with the lower. Even if you compare it with the lower canines, the anatomy of the lingual aspect of maxillary canines are very prominent, meaning the cingulum, very well-developed cingulum, well-developed marginal ridges. Did you include lingual ridge? Did you mention lingual ridge?
Yes, Doc.
Can you expound more on lingual ridge from the lingual aspect? I can see it in your slide, you mentioned about lingual ridge. I've heard you mention labial ridge, that's good. That's why the name of your group is labial ridge. How about lingual? Lingual ridge.
Lingual ridge, Doc, is what separates the distal and mesial fossa, Doc.
Sige. Any other information to add? Or from the reporters or from the class?
The landmarks of Doc is...
never mind the landmarks. If you can have that in your laboratory, you can proceed to the next aspect.
So
So, mabalik ko from the start though. Visual aspect. From the visual aspect, canine looks similar but bulkier, larger than maxillary and central incisor. Outline of crown is wedge-shaped. It is narrowly triangular, wider at the apex, and tapering towards the base.
Tapering.
Tapering towards the base, rather. Maxillary canine is the widest anterior tooth labilingually. So, the lingual lobe of a canine is much larger and thicker than the lingual lobe of an incisor, which results in the canine being much wider labilingually than a maxillar incisor. Root outline is conical with bluntly pointed apex. The cervical line curvature is towards incisally.
In distal aspect, distal surface is very similar to the mesial surface. The cervical line exhibits less curvature. The distal surface is generally smaller with resultant shorter labial and lingual margins. Height of contour is located at a more cervical level. The contact is near the middle third. So distal is behind towards the back of the mouth and it's away from the middle of the face. And it's similar to mesial surface except sa cervical line, contact area, concave area, marginal ridge, and the depression. Because in distal, the cervical area is less curved and the contact area is more cervical. Then the concave area is more pronounced and marginal ridge is heavier. Then and more irregular and heavier and more irregular and the depression on the root becomes grooved. Incisal aspect. The labiolingual dimension is greater than the mesial-distal dimension. Pakita bitaw dari. Pakita bitaw dari. Makita lang akong. Hindi lang yun. Kani. So, ang giingon daw kay ang labiolingual dimension labiolingual
Labiolingual.
labiolingual
Guys, wait lang ha. Give me a second. Not that I'm very strict with how you pronounce the words, but there are clinical instructors as you go further. You'll be talking about labia, labiolingual. To read the words correctly lang, kung dili mo makoreksyonan. So better nga, I will correct you as early as now. Like, it's not apex, root apex, it's root apex. It's not tapering, it's tapering, taper, from the word taper. It's not labio, it's labiolingual. Yes? Someone's raising his hand?
Doc, isn't it more accurate to call it labiopalatal, Doc, than labiolingual for maxillary?
Yes, you can have the word also. Yes, you have the point. Labiopalatal or labiolingual. But again, these terms are interchangeable, but normally we use the labiolingual in general. But it's, again, I'd like to emphasize that as per the upper, the most correct or the more correct or applicable term is palatal rather than lingual. But you have a point, Muhammad. Yes, can we continue?
Yes, Doc. The labiolingual dimension is greater than the mesial-distal dimension. This is the labio and the lingual. Then, makita niyo siya nga greater mesial-distal dimension. Maxillary canine.
Which?
Doc?
Asa man yun ang greater niya nga width? Asa man yun siya mas baga? Greater width, mesial-distally or labiolingually? In terms of canines. Oh, di ba? From the first bullet, labiolingual is greater than mesiodistal. What did you mention a while ago? Mesiodistal is greater, right?
Yes, I believe that. Yes, daw.
Sige. Guys, daghan kayo mo sa isa ka grupo, no? Pero daghan kayo palpak inyong report. I don't know if nag-uban mo kay nag-prepare mo, nag-brainstorm, or ano sa ba? Balik ka sa previous slide. I guess there are 7, 8 members in each group. Then naman. Then, basta, ang buto. Next time, tarungan yung report, ha?
Yes, daw.
Sige, balik ko na from the incisal aspect, from the first bullet.
So the labiolingual dimension is greater than the mesiodistal dimension.
Sige, balik. Paminaw, everyone. I might be asking you in the exam. I-compare niyo mo sa centrals or sa incisors, be it central or lateral. Can anyone remember? In terms of incisors, which is greater ang width? Mesiodistal or labiolingual?
Labio.
Sige daw, balik ka. I'm talking about incisors as a whole, especially central incisor. Which is greater maniya? Iyan mesiodistal or labiolingual?
Mesiodistal. Labiolingual.
Sige. Guys, before you answer, you think daw, you're done carving the centrals and laterals? Para mo carve the central incisor, lateral incisor, especially upper.
Yes, so.
Sa iyong pag-carve, asa man ang mas baga? Mesiodistal? We know what mesial and distal aspects, right?
Yes.
Nakasabot makata sa mesial o distal. Sige. Kasabot tag labial o lingual.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sa inyong pag-carve sa central o lateral incisor, which dimension is greater? Mesiodistal or labiolingual?
Labiolingual.
Labiolingual is
Okay, Geraldine, I answered labiolingual, right? Show me your carving daw kung asa mas baga. Mesiodistal ba labiolingual? Send it via PM. Sige, anyone? Mesiodistal or labiolingual for incisors?
Mesiodistal.
O di ba mesiodistal? Mas lapad siya mesiodistal eh. Even when you smile, try to smile daw. And feel it with your tongue. Or tanawa yung sa samin or sa camera. Di ba mas baga siya mesiodistal lapad. Now, i-compare that sa mong canine. When you reach canine, it's different. The labiolingual of canine is greater than the mesiodistal. Mas lapad siya labiolingual. Nakasabot? Again, which is a greater dimension for canine? Labiolingual or mesiodistal?
Labiolingual daw.
Sige, next bullet.
Next, maxillary canine is generally convex or rounded to its labial and lingual outlines.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by convex?
Rounded shot dog.
Or mga bugdo, there are a lot of curvatures. Can you see that? There are a lot of curvatures. Dili siya edge nga kanang sharply pointed, but there are a lot of curvatures or made up of circles. Sige, next bullet now.
The custate is labial to the center of the crown, labiolingually, and mesial to the center mesiodistally.
O sige, next slide. Tanawa daw again. I'll ask you again in the exam. Sige, I will ask. If a line in your maxillary canine, as per the install aspect, if a line bisecting the crown labiolingually, where is the location of the cusp tip? Again, balikon ako ha. What if I'll ask you again, for maxillary canine, from the incisal aspect, if a line bisecting the crown labiolingually, where is the cusp tip located? Sige, what will be your answer? In terms of mesiodistal, asa siya mas pabor? Mesial or distal?
On mesial aspect, more on mesial.
Okay, mesial aspect also because remember, the mesial slope is shorter, right? Going back to the labial aspect, we mentioned that the mesial slope is shorter. That's why ang iyang cusp tip sad mapunta sa mesial than that of the distal because the slope is longer there. Nakuha ni? Now,
Yes, sir.
labiolingually, asa man ang location sa cusp tip? Labial or lingual? Tanawa sa picture daw.
It's more on labial, Doc.
Alright. So therefore, the location now is more mesially from the center and more labially. Again, mesially and labially. Look at the picture. Mesial and distal. Ang kana lang line ni nga bisect sa duha kay medyo. But anyways, mesial and labial. Your next bullet. Previous slide, your next bullet.
The labial ridge and the cingulum are noticeable from this aspect. Incisal aspect has a large cusp with a pointed cusp tip.
Diba? Pwede yung dali annulments permanent canines maxillary good.
Another thing in maxillary canine incisal aspect, this part of the crown is bilaterally asymmetrical with larger distal half. And
Wait,
when
come again, balika.
this part of the crown is bilaterally asymmetrical with larger distal half.
Okay, again, balikon ako guys. Asymmetrical, look at the crown. If i-bisect nimo into half, symmetrical, pareha ba ang left to right or lahi? Is the mesial half with the distal half?
Dili, Doc. Mas dako ang distal, Doc.
So therefore, they are not symmetrical compared to the central incisors or lateral incisors. And normally, somehow same ilang mga mesial distal half. For the maxillary canine, it's totally different. There is marked asymmetry. Again, I will repeat, marked asymmetry. Meaning, maklaro ni mo nga lahi kaayo, asymmetry, not symmetry. Asymmetry. Therefore, the distal half is different to that of the mesial half. Why is that so?
I think it's because of the distal marginal cusp, Doc. Like, distal incisal cusp.
The distal incisal, you mean? Yes, you have a
Yes,
point.
Doc.
Look at the distal part. There's a certain curvature there compared to the mesial. That's why again, if you compare that marked asymmetry, lahi kaayo ang iyang appearance from the mesial to the distal aspect. Anyone would like to add more information? Not only from the reporters, but to the class or from the class?
Yes, Doc. I'd like to add na nga naman gibot sa Doc. They write it like the maxillary canine is labiolingually greater 1 mm compared to central incisor, maxillary central incisor. Pero It's fractionally shorter or smaller mesiodistally compared to maxillary central incisor though.
Okay, yeah. So therefore, in general, if you state it, the central incisors are larger mesiodistally, while the canines are larger labiolingually. Sakto?
Yes though.
Okay. Anyone? Isa pa mo add of information from the class. Or we proceed na to kay ito ko ana. Sige, I'll have my slides na lang for the upper and lower together after the mandibular canines. Yeah, anyone? Napailaing mo add? Wala na? By the way, we have foreign nationals here, no? Hindi kasabot those that cannot understand the vernacular.
Wala, Doc.
Bisaya, kasabot na tanan. How about Muhammad? You understand Bisaya?
So kasabot ko Doc, pero gamay lang Doc. Kaya ra na.
Okay. Sige. What's your nationality, by the way?
My nationality is Filipino Doc, but I grew up in Malaysia, like high school ko there. That's why.
But you're pure Filipino.
Yes Doc, yes Doc.
Sige. So, okay na tayo mag-Bisaya. Sige, go. Proceed to mandibular canine. By the way, just to share, the highest for P1 is 34. You see the results, right? The highest is 34. Though the passing is 38, but it's almost a passing mark. Again, the highest is 34, the passing is 38, almost a passing mark, 34. Muhammad got that grade. Sige, proceed mandibular canine.
Okay, for the mandibular canine, the crown is narrower than the maxillary canine. When we say narrower, it is skinny or usually tall or higher in height. And sometimes the root may be bifurcated or the root is divided into two branches or it has this two roots. But it is rare only, ranging from 1 to 5%. And we clearly have here a mesial view of a left canine that shows prominent root bifurcation. As you can see here, the root is divided into two.
So the tooth numbering system in universal system is 22 and 27 for the mandibular, and the palmar is third quadrant T and fourth quadrant T. And for the FDI system, 3 and 4 Chronology for the first evidence of calcification is about 4 to 5 months, and the enamel completed is about 6 to 7 years, and the eruption is 9 to 10 years, and for the root completed is 12 to 14 years.
Okay, let's focus on the eruption age. Come again, for maxillary canine, the eruption age is?
11.
How about for the lower?
9.
9 to 10. Okay. Again, 9 to 10. Pero dili ko makalimutan eh. Remember, for the mandibular, it's 9. K9. But for the lower, it's different na. It's 11 to, for the upper, it's 11 to 12. But again, in general, guys, kanang at the age of 9 years old, be it for upper and lower, if the child is already 9, therefore, magunahuna dayon ka, you need to think that the canines are already there. If for the mandibular canines, that's 9 to 10. So at 9, the lower canine is already there. How much more? Asayot day kay 11 ba yung upper, no? But this is just a general guideline that most dentists follow ba. You will understand this more in practice na. For 9 gani K9, that's what we call it 9. Normally at 9 na ano na siya. For premolars also 10. There are a lot. Di ba niya na, it's more of range. It's more of range. Ang eruption but it's not really an exact time. Like you say it's already 10, like it's just 10. Sometimes as early as 9, sometimes as late as 11. That's why in the exam I seldom ask for eruption age because na-confuse mo ba except for molars nga erupt at 6 yun 6 years of age. But anyways, good to note nga canines, be it upper and lower, normally at 9 they already erupt. For premolars, 10 they erupt. For first molar, 6, di ba 6 years old. For second molar, that's 12. Again, balik ko na po. Canines, normally they erupt at 9 years old. When we say 10, in general, that's for premolars, be it upper and lower, be it first or second premolar. In first molar, that's 6 years old. In second molar, that's 12 years old. Nakuha ni?
Yes, no.
Again, dili yun na mao ang age of eruption niya as per the book. But in general, as a guide lang, kaya it's very hard to memorize, especially when you become dentist. It's very hard to memorize like 9 to 10, 11 to 12. You cannot remember these stuff. That's why nalang tayo guide nga you follow. But since you are still a student and board exam pa man mo, you need to memorize the 9 to 10 for the lower and 11 to 12 for the upper. Do you get this, guys? No.
Yes, no.
Sige, proceed daw.
Labial aspect. Mandibular canines are similar to maxillary canines except that they are slightly narrower mesiodistally. Mesial outline of the crown is straight and in line with the mesial outline of the roof. The mesial cusp ridge is smaller than the distal cusp ridge. Cingulum is less prominent and marginal ridges are less distinct.
So when we say, wait lang. When we say less prominent, dili siya not nag-stand out, not really nag-stand out or not nag-project, while the marginal ridges are less distinct. For the mesial outline, it is straight and obtuse in mesio-incisal angle. Straight and obtuse or not sharp in mesio-incisal angle pertaining to its mesial and the incisal surfaces. And for the distal outline, it is convex. Again and again, convex is curved or rounded, and convex and rounded in disto-incisal angle. And for the incisal aspect, not sharp as the maxillary canine. For the mesial and distal aspects, these aspects are very similar and the cervical lines curves more in the mesial aspect. As you can see in the illustration, the cervical line of the mesial is more curved. And the contact area on the mesial aspect is in the incisal third and a little higher on the distal third.
Incisal aspect. Like the maxillary canine, the labiolingual dimension is more than the mesiodistal dimension. The cusp tip appears inclined in a lingual direction. As you can see in this image, the outline of lower canines from the incisal aspect is often similar to that of upper canine. The labiolingual dimension of the crown is longer than the mesiodistal dimension, similar to upper canine, and the cusp tip is more likely to be inclined lingually. The crown is twisted or on the incisal edge to the distal, and the cingulum is centered or slightly distal to the long axis. Root. The root is shorter by 1 or 2 millimeter than maxillary canine. The developmental depression is more pronounced on the lower canine.
Mao natutunan sa mandibular canines.
Yes, no.
Sige. Balik ko na ta, guys. By round 2, that is mandibular canines. Labial aspect data daw. Sige daw. Guys, laan ni mo ulit na nang nasa content sa module.
Dili Doc, kay complete na lang fast Doc, especially sa question.
Come again.
Like, especially the question on canine success Doc, it's like detailed siya Doc.
Sir, give me a second.
Nasa road module na.
The screen on your right, that's your mandibular canine. Now, we will differentiate the two in general, okay? You have the roots, right? There. Okay. Remember, in terms of roots, the maxillary canines have the longest root. Again, of all the dentition, of all the teeth, of all the permanent teeth, the upper canines have the longest root. So therefore, if you compare nimo ang maxillary to mandibular canine, basically the upper canine has a longer root. Because in fact, if you compare it to any other teeth in the mouth, it has still the longest root. Okay? So again, if I'll ask you the longest tooth, Again, the longest root, that's maxillary canine. Now, i-compare na to sila, the upper and the lower canine, based on the crown from the labial aspect. Asa ang mas lapad? In terms of mesiodistal wave, upper or lower canine?
Upper canine.
Upper canine, right? But again, do not confuse in terms of mesiodistal and labiolingual, ang duha ka canines, greater labiolingual with yun sila in general. Now, if we compare the two canines, upper and lower canine, in terms of mesiodistal wave, the upper canine mas lapad siya, greater mesiodistal width compared to the lower. Now, in terms of height, ang gitaspon incisor-cervically, gitaspon na niya incisor-cervically, the lower canine is greater. So therefore, akong klarohon, in terms of mesiodistal width, ang upper canine is greater. In terms of height, incisor-cervically, the lower canine is greater. Therefore, for the lower canine, there is a narrowness effect of the crown. Ninipis ang crown niya because mas taas man siya. In terms of incisor-cervical with height, longer siya. That's why ni-narrow. Murabag ni-daot siya tungod kay taas siya. Di ba ka na mga tao nga mostly taas, mga daot sila. Therefore, this makes the crown of the lower canine as the longest crown in all the dentition. Again, akong balikon, ang mandibular canine crown, siya ang naay longest crown of all the teeth in the mouth. Why? Because of its incisor-cervical height, and since it is narrow mesiodistally, it gives the appearance of being elongated. So, ang maxillary canine, longest root. Mandibular canine, longest crown. Klaro ni?
Dok, pwede pa balik ang reason nga it's the longest crown, Dok, for the mandibular canine?
Okay, I will reiterate. Longest crown siya, it is because it has a larger incisor-cervical height. Again, from incisal to cervical, incisal to neck, longer yung height. Now, nga mo appear siya og longer pa dyan, it is because of the narrowness of the crown. Taas plus nipis. You understand what's taas and nipis?
Yes, no.
Okay, pero si ano ba si Muhammad ba siya kagets? Okay.
Sorry.
Hello, ano man na.
Yes, kasabot ra ko, kasabot ra.
Di ba murang tao ba? Ang tao nga nipis o taas. Di ba? Taas na gani, daot pag yun. Musamot ka taas. Na-gets? Taas na daan. Human nipis pag yun. Di pag yun siya tambok. Muna, musamot siya kataas tanawon. That's why, because of the narrowness of the mesiodistal wave, it amplifies its length. Muna, mas mataas siya tanawon. That's why it has a longest crown of all dentition. It's a board exam question. Take note.
Yes, got it, Dok.
Understand, Muhammad, nang nakuha, why?
Yes, Dok.
Okay. So, longest root, maxillary canine. Longest crown, mandibular canine. So, tanda na in general. Longest root, maxillary canine, you can even palpate it. You know, ala of the nose? The sides of your nose. Look at the camera for those who can see my camera ba. The ala of the nose kanang sa sides sa imong nose. Palpate that. You can feel the apex of the canine. It's very prominent, or the roots of the canine very prominent, forming a canine eminence. Na-understand na ni? Can I proceed to my next slide? Any other question? proceed.
Okay, not dog.
Okay, I want to emphasize again, still this is an upper canine. The mesial slope, again for the incisors, walay slope ha, ridge ra gyud, walay slope, straight raman gyud to yung incisal aspect. When you reach canine na, we will talk about slopes na. Dili na siya straight nga incisal edge lang siya. There are already slopes. So, good to know, the mesial slope of canine is shorter than that of the distal slope. Again, mesial slope, shorter, distal slope, longer. That's why the location of the cusp tip, look at the cursor moving. Kana diha, you have the cusp tip. Since shorter man ang mesial slope compared to distal slope, mo na yung cusp tip pod is more located mesially. Kay shorter good ang mesial slope niya. Now for the lingual, as I mentioned, for the upper canines, the lingual landmarks are very prominent. Prominent cingulum, prominent lingual ridge, prominent slopes, prominent marginal ridges. Now, I want to focus with the lingual ridge. Lingual ridge, you don't have this in your incisors, right? Lingual fossa ridge siya. In incisors, there's only one lingual fossa, right? There's no lingual ridge. However, when you reach canine, you already have a lingual ridge. Ang lingual ridge located at the center, it's when you say ridge, it's a linear elevation. Located at the center, lingual ridge, it divides the lingual fossa into two. Again, akong balikon. If you compare canines in general to incisors, incisors, you only have one fossa, lingual fossa. You don't have lingual ridge. For canine, you still have fossa, but there are already two fossae separated by a lingual ridge. That's why you have a mesial fossa and you have a distal fossa. To be exact, the term is mesiolingual fossa, distolingual fossa, because they can be found from the mesial aspect and from the lingual. That's why mesiolingual. The other one is distal and can be found on the lingual. That's why distolingual fossa. Nakuha. Now for the boundary, that yellow mark, see that's the lingual ridge. Kita mo, there's a prominent line. Maklaro sa picture.
Yes, doc.
Okay, that's the lingual ridge. Again, divide niya ang fossa into two. That's why, that's the distal aspect niya siya. Mesial pa ni, mesial aspect. Distal. Distal aspect niya kay longer yung slope. That black there is a distal marginal ridge. Nakuha? Balik ko nakuha. That's the lingual ridge, right? That black mark is the distal marginal ridge. Now, on the center of that, that's the distolingual fossa. Nagets ninyo?
Yes, doc.
Okay. Distal marginal ridge of the distolingual fossa. On the other side also, you have the mesiolingual fossa and you have the mesial marginal ridge. Are you getting the boundaries and the landmarks?
Yes, doc.
Okay. Again, balik ko na ko ha, kakatulo na gid ni. Incisors only have one fossa, no lingual ridge. For canine, it's different. You have the lingual ridge that divides the fossa into two. This is also same with the lower. However, when you reach lower lang, the landmarks are still there, but they are poorly developed. You can even touch etong inyong tongue, i-run through sa inyong canines. Mas ma-feel ninyo ang upper kumpara sa lower nga lingual part. Again, the landmarks are still there, but for the lower, they are less prominent, less developed. Can I proceed to my next slide? Any question for the lingual aspect of maxillary canine?
Okay na, Doc.
Okay, for the incisal, this is for the upper canine. Remember the location of the cusp tip? If you draw a line bisecting the crown labiolingually at the center, that's it. The location of the cusp tip is asaman, mesial or distal?
Special.
Okay. Same thing. Where's the location of the cusp tip? Labial or lingual?
Labial.
Labial. Kaya ana. Bukod the cusp tip, asa siya? It's labial and mesial. Again, from that part, there, ka na siya. Mesial and labial. Now, for the facial aspect of mandibular canine, this is naga po niya sa book and modules. If you look at the crown from the labial aspect of mandibular canine, the mesial outline is straight compared to its distal outline. Again, balikon ako. If you look at the labial aspect of mandibular canine, the mesial outline is straight or relatively straight. There is straightness of the mesial outline compared to the distal outline. I do not be confused with the convexity. Mura siya dili straight because bugdo man, there is a convexity on this part. But if you compare it, this is more straight, relatively straight, compared to the curved or slanting part of the distal aspect. Again, relatively straight mesial outline compared to the distal outline. Balik ko
How about sa maxillary, Doc?
for the maxillary, it wasn't described man sa book. Wala yung i-describe ang book. More on mesial slope and distal slopes lang.
Sige, Doc.
Okay. However, going back, di ba, balik na sa incisal aspect sa maxillary canine. Again, on the distal aspect, there is a marked asymmetry. Meaning, lahi kaayo ang iyang distal compared sa iyang mesial. See? Smooth kaayo ang curvatures on this part. But it's a different curvature now on the distal aspect. That's why marked asymmetry. Kanipod, labial aspect of mandibular canine, straight mesial outline compared to the distal outline. Wala. Okay. Any other questions so far? Okay, as I mentioned, canines are the last teeth to go, right? Last teeth. Even if you check it with your lolo and your lola, your grandparents, and even when you become dentist na in the practice, mag-expect yun ka. In most cases, all the teeth are gone, already extracted, except for canines. Ang kanang imong tango, they are the last teeth to go. Di yun na sila ma-extract na gyudayon. Kana bitong inignisin mo na agapon ilang mga canines, o check it with your lolo and lola. Wala na yung mga ngipon pero naapagyapon ang canine, intact ang upper and lower canines. Why is that so? Anyone? Aside from the exfoliation or the eruption age, or kanus asya mo ano, aside from that, do you have any idea? Ano ang canine man yung mahibiling? They are the last teeth to go, meaning of all other permanent teeth, sila ang pinakadugay nga mamorg ka.
Can I answer?
Attached rigidly?
Yes, come on,
Like-
good mark. Lang sa.
Maybe for me it's attached rigidly.
Attached rigidly. How about other teeth there? They're not attached rigidly.
They are, but maybe in the canine they are more. Mas may paborsa dira
Okay.
kasi sa uban ng ipon.
Okay, You have a point because remember also in terms of attachment, remember canines, they have very long roots, right? Especially the upper canine.
Yeah.
Taas kayong roots. And we know that roots help in the anchorage, right? It will help in the anchorage and the retention of the tooth. Could be a possible reason. Again, that could be a possible reason. But that's not the main reason. Can I have any other answer? But thank you, John Mark. I got your point.
Because of self-cleansing, Doc.
Can you expound more on that, Sheena Jane?
Because self-cleansing, Doc, is a mere movement of lips and tongue. That's why, when we eat something, usually the canine is usually it is more clean the niya ang canine. That is maybe the one reason why canine lasts long because usually ma-cleanse siya.
Okay. Can I have any other answer? Thank you for that, Sheena. Can I have any other answer? Kinsa pa tong ano?
Doc, is it because canine has the longest roots?
Yes, you already mentioned that with Junmar. In terms of anchorage, which could be a possible explanation. Any other answer or wild guess from the class?
How about sa kuan, Doc? Because the root kanang root, Doc, ya na siya ay developmental depression mo like ni secure sa like
That,
the bottom.
okay. Stay with the roots, right? Developmental depression help in the anchorage and retention. That could be a possible reason also. Again, wala na answer so that I can explain further. The question, Naini-chan, the question, why are the canines the last teeth to go? That's the question. Okay, actually that was right, Sheena. Guys, nasa yung module, FAQ, frequently asked questions. You have the self-cleansing term there. Again, when we say self-cleansing, that is the ability of the tooth to be cleansed by the movement of the lips and the tongue and even the cheeks. Now, remember canines, as I mentioned, there is made up of curvatures and convexities. Less ang iyang angulations compared to incisors nga. Maklaro nimo ang mga angles na mga angulations. The canines, they are made up of curvatures, as I mentioned. They are more of circles, curvatures, convexities, less angles, less angulations. Therefore, they have the self-cleansing ability. Since they are more curved, they are curvatures, the food debris will just laugh off from the canines. Ang imuhang mga ki, ang imong mga hugaw, they would not stick that much to the canines because there are less angulations, there are more curved convexities. So when you eat, the movement of the tongue and the lips, and because of the curvatures of your canines, the food would less likely to be trapped on that area compared to the other teeth. There are a lot of angulations, there are a lot of sharp edges or less rounded edges like incisors, right? Mas curved, mas dagan man og angulations in yung mga centrals and even your posterior teeth compared to the canine, which is curved. Di ba? Maklaro naman canine curve kaayo siya circles or more siya dome shape. Ang the food there will just laugh off mo agira, dili siya mo stick, less likely nga mo stick. That's why we call it self-cleansing ability. It has the ability to clean itself because of the curvatures. And this explains why they are the last teeth to go, because because of the anatomy, they can clean their own. Makalimpyo sila sa ilang kaugalingon. Therefore, less predisposition to dental caries. So least likely nga madaot ang imong canines. And this explains why they are the last teeth to go. Nakuha, nasabtan?
Yes, Doc.
Yes, Doc.
Doc, thank you, Doc.
Any other question?
Doc, can we talk about ka ng bifurcation, no? Mandibular canine, Doc?
Okay, good thing. Si Muhammad kay mura nagbasa gyud kay nasa question nga root bifurcation. It's a common anomaly as mentioned for mandibular canines. Kani magud the reporter should expound on this. Wala nila gi-appeal. Pero naa ni sa libro na po sa module. Di ba, a common anomaly of mandibular canine is sa ganito, root bifurcation. But again, that is an anomaly. That's not a common common anatomy because ang anatomy sa canine single-rooted man. We're still talking about mono-rooted teeth, but when you reach premolars, diha na dayon ang mga bifurcations. But again, a common anomaly of mandibular canines is that instead nga single root siya, ni bifurcate. When you say bifurcate, ni separate ang iyang ngipon, ang iyang root rather. That's why instead nga single-rooted siya, na bi-rooted siya. But again, that is just an anomaly. In the normal landmark and ideal anatomy, single-rooted rin ang canine. Dili siya bi-rooted. But again, common anomaly niya, two roots. So far, wala pa ko kitaan na in the practice. And even when I was a clinician, I haven't seen that anomaly. Any other question? Any other question, guys? Wala na?
Excuse me, Doc.
Yes.
May question po ako kasi 'di ba sabi niyo po anomaly yung bifurcation sa mandibular canine. So I'm asking if does that affect yung crown of the tooth or it's just sa root lang?
Yeah, it will not affect the crown. Root lang yun siya. I-bifurcate. But to give you an idea, how do you read your name? Jemima or Jemima?
Jemima, Doc.
Okay. To give you an idea, again, for the anomaly of the root, yes, the crown won't be affected. Ang root again i-bifurcate. However, to give you an idea, when you reach oral pathology, it's a very interesting subject. Not only oral pathology, but pathology as a whole. Only ang mga subjects na pinakaganahan kayo ko. Pathology talks about diseases. Among all subjects, I like pathology the most. But I'm not handling pathology. But to give you idea lang, there are also anomaly. You'll talk about Doc Esguerra, oral pathology will be handled by Doc Esguerra. You'll talk about pathology of the crown and the root of the tooth. There is also an anomaly in which the crown tries to bifurcate or the crown tries to separate or divide into two. Dahil mga ingon ana, naapod nga the crown and even the root, the two crowns and the two roots of the two teeth try to merge, try to fuse. Napoy mga ingon ana. Napoy mga cementum, where we know cementum, right? The outer covering of the root. There are also cementum of one tooth trying to fuse with the cementum of the other tooth. We also have hypercementosis, meaning overproduction of the cementum, making the root very bulbous. Mga anomalies, but not under oral but good to know lang. You reach oral pathology. Very interesting. Any other question pa? Wala? Guys, as much as I want to discuss the answers for P1, there are those nga wala pa nakatake na pa-special exam. And to be fair with all of you, I cannot discuss the answers, right? Pero let's just discuss the first two items. Kanilang sila. I will change lang. So para duha ra questions ang akong i-change. Wala na yung question sa K9?
Is there a term like, for example, kanakinan daw, from mesial aspect it resembles sisal, but from the distal aspect it resembles kuandok, premolars?
Because yes, you have that in your module again or in the book also. Diba, remember K9, this kaninga ngipon, the K9s serve as, there are corners of, wait, good to know ha, K9s corners of the mouth. The upper canines specifically, they're also called the eye tooth. Again, canines are called the eye tooth because naka-inline siya sa imong eye. Diba, remember, ala of the nose, naka-inline siya sa imong eye. That's why eye tooth. That's another trivia regarding canine. Corners of the mouth, they're also known as the eye tooth. Yes, most likely naka-align. Daw, i-palpate mong canine, naka-align siya sa imong eyeball. Okay. Okay, gitistingan na daw niya. Sige, go on. Nakakuha na sa mong eyeball, imong canine. That's why eye tooth ang tawag sila na nila. Yes, nato. Kung sa ganito, Muhammad, kalimutan ko sa question na.
Like,
I mean, yeah, mesial half ni resembles ancestor. Yes. Remember, yes, nakaremember na ko. Ang imuhang canine, siya ang nag-serve as demarcation of your anteriors hantod nga mo transition na to the posterior. Kaya after the canine, you have premolars, which are posterior. Now, in anatomy, ang imong canine will help, since nakasenter siya sa anterior o posterior, it will somehow help the anteriors in terms of function and the posteriors in terms of function. Now, in terms of anatomy, the mesial half of the canine resembles your incisors. The distal half incisors more of your posterior, specifically premolars. Because of that location, it helps in function and almost same in anatomy. The mesial half resembles more of an incisor. The distal half resembles more of the premolars. Did I answer your question, Muhammad?
yes, Doc. Thank you, Doc.
Sige, wait. Actually, you have that in your modules as well. Sige, we'll discuss the first two questions, guys. Guys, for all you know, the exam, I don't have any other source. Ako ang nagbuhat agad sa questions. Again, I make the questions. If naa magani dili from me, few questions lang. But mostly, questions I create from the module and from the book. Now, let's focus number 1. Actually, number 1, I copy-pasted this from the modules. Look at the definition sa inyong first part sa module ninyo. Katong yung mga cementum, enamel, pulp. Naagito sa definition niya. Katong made up of 4 basic tissue which are daw, check on your SAS daw. Ana pa ba ninyo? Napas na ninyo, no? Now, what's your answer for number 1? Tip, guys, do not be overwhelmed by the question. Ayaw mo ka-shock ang questioning, ana, or taas ka ayo basig lisod. It's not the length of the question that dictates that difficulty. That doesn't mean nga lisod at taas, lisod kaya siran. Ayaw mo ka, do not be intimidated by short or long questions. Just focus, keep calm and focus on the question. Bahalag taas. What's your answer for number 1?
C.
Ako is C, Doc.
How about the other?
Same, Doc. Seafood.
Okay, say, diba? Sa'yo ni lesson number 1. Naani sa inyong module, ako rin yung gigi 5 yun. May uban akong giyaw-yaw.
Yes, Doc. Nasa medyo.
Okay, let's start with letter A. The enamel being the covering of the anatomical crown is the first to develop during odontogenesis. Wait guys, do not be overwhelmed by odontogenesis. Wala pa mo ana, di ba? You'll have that in your further subject. So therefore, most probably, that's not the answer. Diba, think beyond out of the box. Odontogenesis, wala man ni-mention ni Doc. Wala po ni-mention sa module. Then most probably, this is not the answer. Yes. Yes? Isa to ni try to ano, wala? I guess itong question, can I continue?
Yes, Doc.
Okay. You have no idea about odontogenesis, so do not confuse yourself about odontogenesis is the formation of the tooth. That's why genesis, origin, or formation. Odonto means tooth. We haven't discussed about odontogenesis. So therefore, do not confuse yourself like, what pa man mi, so why would I answer this, right? But to give you an idea, it's not enamel that will first form. Again, dili enamel ang mo first ka mo form. Dentin ang first, after the pulp. Now, B, statement B. The dentin, correct, diba? Making up the major bulk of the tooth. Is that statement correct? Kana lang. Yes, if kanilang daan correct, making up the major bulk of the tooth. Question, odontoclast ba ang mo form?
No.
Name the
Odontoblast?
Yes,
Odontoblast.
odontoclast. These are the dentin forming cells. Ang class, guys, you know this in histology, mo ni sila ang mo break. If ang odontoblast mo ay mo form, ang class ang mo break. But good to know, you have odontoblast in your modules. Letter D na dayon ta, proceed na sa D. The pulp, where nerves and blood vessels found. Correct? From that statement lang. Sakto ni Dili.
Yes, Doc.
Okay. As its primary function, what is the primary function? Formative. It will form. Question. Unsa man nga tissue iyang i-form? Is it enamel?
Dentin.
Dentin. So therefore, this is false. It forms not the enamel but the dentin. Therefore, naagya po sa module letter C ang answer. The cementum covering the roots of the tooth is not as hard as enamel but has similar hardness to foam. Nanis module wala? Okay, sige daw. Number 2. An anterior to, okay, mutan-abi ako sa'yo mag-answer mo kung anong sa nila mga answer or nang hinuktok ang sa sila. Don't be overwhelmed by the question na taas kayo. Then naman, to shorten your time, mabita ito nga daghan kaayo vacant nga spaces para i-drawing din ninyo ang ITDS, ADA, because there are a lot of questions from there. Para if naa magani tooth numbering, dali ra kayo mo pakli sa asa to ang universal, asa ang ITDS. Number 2, I mentioned na nina ko ganiha. An anterior tooth, be it upper or lower, normally has 4 to 5 developmental lobes. Is this statement true or false? 4 to 5 ba? False.
False.
Again, I mentioned there are only 4 lobes. 3 from the labial, 1 from the lingual. So therefore, 4. False na kay dili man 5 lobes. But there are 5 lobes. We'll discuss that when we reach posterior na. There are 5 lobes in ang ngipon. Now, the largest of these lobes is the middle lobe or the central lobe. True or false? True, right? As I said, the middle lobe is the largest lobe. So therefore, answer ani, only the second statement is true. So far, so good?
Yes, Doc.
Sige, as much as I want to discuss this, pero na pa uban nga wala ni ko.
Doc, pwede pa advise a question, Doc, from P1?
Pwede? Come again?
Can we add one more question from P1, Doc? Kato Something
Which
about nomenclature at the for the FDI nomenclature.
For the FTI naman, sige daw, tell me what you have remembered para ako maskan.
Katong 5 to 8 is dedicated for an entire division.
Okay. Got it. Wait. Asa man to dapat na. Ano man, nalibog mo ato? I cannot rationalize because naagi mga wala pa nakatake kong exam ba. And it would be unfair to your part if ako ning gidiscuss na ilang answeran. Unfair po sa ilaha na tanan akong usbon because the level of difficulty might be different. Pwedeng masayon sa ila or mas lisod na nun sa ila. So mo nang I cannot discuss all the answers. Pero I will change whatever I discuss here, I will change the question. Kato lang ang mga question. I'm still searching asa to the pit. Ito 5 to 8, no? Wait lang ha. Sa ba to the pit? Wait na. Okay, nakuha na ako. Dala. Ako lang i-PDF ha. Para ako sang i-edit. Kani mong pasabot akong gi-change to PDF so that you can not view other Kani?
Yes, this one.
Okay, what's your answer for this, guys? Anyone? What's your answer?
Mine is B, Doc.
Letter?
B.
How about others?
None of the above.
None of the above. How about others? None of the above, San? Sige.
Yeah, none of the above.
Okay, there's no explanation for the none of the above because kuan man ka nang there is the self-explanatory meaning wala exception for you. Can I have kisam to may answer og lain?
Ako, Doc. Letter B, Doc.
Sige, can you expound on this? Kinsa ni si Okay, sige. Can you expound why did you answer B?
Okay, because the term they use, Doc, is within the arch, not within the quadrant.
Correct.
Okay, since it's SDI.
Correct, exactly. By the way, Muhammad got the highest score, 34. Guys, it's another tricky question. numbers 5 to 8 are intended for the primary dentition, right? Quadrants 1 to 4 for the permanent. Quadrants 5 to 8 for the primary. So therefore, that's correct. Now, see, the first digit indicates the quadrant, correct? In two-digit system, each digit represents something. The first digit represents the quadrant where the tooth belongs, like quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. Now, the second digit represents another thing, and that indicates the specific tooth. But remember, in FDI, we are not naming the tooth by arch because that is for the universal. We are naming, focusing by quadrant. Therefore, the second digit indicates the tooth not within the arch, but within the quadrant. Di ba, the quadrants? In each quadrant, ginabira nato siya from numbers 1 to 8. 1 being the central incisor, 2 being the lateral, 3 being the canine, so on and so forth. Therefore, not within the arch, but within the quadrant. Kaya mo man focus sa FDI or sa ITDS. By quadrant ang atong focus, not by arch. Nakuha ang anong kanang answer?
Yes,
No.
Doc.
Okay, so muna, you need some to comprehend. Naka yun na diya, kabalo na mo sa FDI, kabalo mo sa universal. Muna somehow you need to think lang yun ba, comprehend the question. Not by arch, but by quadrant. Ang universal man to ang arch. Nakuha ra?
Yes, Doc. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Doc.
Sige. Would you want to have the quiz at 10:30? Or you want it now, Gidayan? Kaya I will share it na. You want it now, Nat? It's already 10:03. You have 25 minutes. Or you want to have a break? I'll post it by 10:30.
Can we have it later at 10:30 na lang, Doc?
Okay, sige.
The others.
Any other question, guys? Katura? Sige, thank you for today, guys. Let's call it a day. And